So we'll be switching to English, and
Yes.
Kurt is going to talk about 3D in QGIS. So without further ado, please take it away.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so jag är ingång på lärardansk med min danska är så gott, so I will present in English. And I was asked to present on 3D in QGIS. So I'm going to have this be a mix of PowerPoint and some live demos. Again, my name is Kurt Menke and I work at Septima. And this image that you're looking at on the title slide here is a 3D scene generated in QGIS from point cloud data. We'll be looking at that. So the 3D viewer in QGIS supports all the major data models. So obviously raster data, like you're seeing here with this depiction of a mountain in QGIS. This is Mount Rainier from a DEM. It's kind of obvious, but we can also extrude vector data into 3D. Mesh data can also be brought into the 3D environment, and point clouds as well. And you're seeing the viewer here on the slide. This is what the 3D viewer looks like. And this button on the toolbar here opens up this navigation panel on the right. And you have some buttons for tilting the view. You can use the compass rose to rotate the view. And then there are zoom in, zoom out controls. And you can use the mouse button for panning the view as well. So there's a variety of fairly intuitive tools for navigating within a 3D scene. So I was going to show a couple demos, one being a DEM for Månsklint and Mount Rainier. And the Månsklint DEM, I think, must just be too large for my little laptop here and was not performing well. So I have some slides that show that, but I'm going to start with this DEM of Mount Rainier because it's quite small and performs quite well for a short demo. So I just have a DEM here and a hillshade to make a colored hillshade image. And if I want to bring this into a 3D scene, I simply go to the view menu and open a new 3D map view. And the new 3D map view opens as a panel. And so if you try to expand it, it may try to dock to different parts of the interface like other panels. So it's really good if you have a dual monitor set up and you can put the 3D view on a separate screen. Now it opens exactly as I saw the view in my main map canvas, and I can start using these navigation controls to start tilting the terrain into more of what we would expect to be a 3D view. But as you can see, this is looking pretty flat. And that's just because I have not configured the view and told it where the elevation source is coming from. So I can go to the little tool icon and click on configure to bring up the 3D configuration for my view. And instead of the type being flat terrain, I'm going to choose DEM raster layer. And this kind of red error message pops up, but it's really just telling me that I have to pick the elevation layer from my layers. So I'll point to my DEM and click OK. And so now the view will get rendered into 3D. And I can start to do things like zoom in or use the compass rose to spin this around. So one thing that will happen when you start experimenting in a 3D view is that you'll see kind of seam lines between the different tiles that are creating the 3D view. And you can eliminate those with one of the settings in this configure options. If I click on configure, this item called skirt height is the one that I can use to address this. This basically adjusts the height of the tiles and kind of and if you set this value by default, it's set at 10 and I'm putting it at 100. That will adjust the skirt height And now if I start to rotate again, you can see that those kind of artifacts between different tiles are not visible. So that often helps. And so you can zoom in. Another thing that you can do with a 3D scene like this is create an animation or a fly-through video. And you start that process from this animations tool, and it opens up a panel across the bottom of your 3D map view. And there are these things called keyframes that you can set, which are different camera positions. So QGIS always comes with 2 default camera settings. I'm going to remove this 5-second one. And so here I am kind of at 0 seconds at the beginning of my animation. And so what I could do, for example, is start rotating the display and click the green plus button to add another keyframe at 2 seconds and continue to rotate. I'll kind of just fly around the mountain. Put this at 4 seconds. Add another at 6. So as soon as you know kind of how you want the camera to move through the scene, it's fairly easy to set up a fly through like this. I'll make this one at 10 seconds. And then finally, perhaps I can zoom out a little bit and add a last one at 12 seconds. So I have a series of keyframes now that I created. And then I can click this play button and QGIS will play the scene with the timestamps that I chose for this. And if you click loop, it will continue through the animation once it reaches the end. So if you wanted to make this pause that. If you wanted to create an animated GIF or an MP4 from this, you use this export animation frames tool, and this will export a series of still images. So you create a folder on your hard drive where you want those images to be dumped. It should be an empty folder, and it's going to name those images 0001, 0002, replace these hashes with those, and you can set your frame rate and the dimensions of that. And it's fairly easy in Gimp. I'll show you how you can stitch together an animation in Gimp if you want to. So that's how you export the still images. You can also just export the current scene as an image, a PNG or a JPEG. And there's also a measure tool in the 3D viewer, so I can measure a distance on the view. And it measures not only the horizontal distance, but also the vertical distance of the line that you traced on the screen. So it's a kind of a 3D measurement. Another feature of 3D in QGIS is that it's exposed in a print composition. So if I open up a layout, I have a layout here of just the map canvas here, and there's a button here for adding a 3D map to your map canvas. So I can drag a 3D map here, and I can choose in item properties to copy the settings from my 3D view, 3D map 1, and it's loading it now. And there's my view, and I can adjust the position of the camera within item properties here to tweak that if I want to, or just set this from the 3D view. So it's also possible then to create maps that have that 3D scene embedded in them. So this is an animation I produced from the Mundsklint DEM. I have some contours on it and a satellite image draped over. So in this case, I had the DEM turned off and just turned on the aerial photo base map and the contours, and set the elevation source as the DEM. And so it creates this draped imagery over the DEM in the 3D viewer. And then I exported these scenes and still images and stitched them together in Gimp. And that's fairly easy to do. There's really only 3 steps to generating an image from a series of still images in Gimp. It's opening the individual files as layers. So you go to the directory where you exported those images, select them all, open as layers, and then you go to the filter menu in Gimp to animation and choose optimize for GIF. Those 2 steps can take a few minutes if you have especially a large series of images, like several hundred images to stitch together. But you can go get a cup of coffee and come back and it's done. And then it's just exporting this out. And when you get the export images GIF window, you of course want to check as animation. You can choose loop forever so that it continuously plays. And then you can set the delay between frames. So this is a chance for you to decide how long the animation is from beginning to end. You can kind of multiply the milliseconds by the number of images you have to get an estimate of how long that resulting GIF will be. And then you can choose to use that delay for all the frames, and then just click export and it does it. So it's fairly straightforward. So the 3D environment also works for point cloud data. So this is a point cloud data set for Delft in the Netherlands. It's kind of colored using RGB symbols from a satellite image. And you can see that in the layer styling panel, this is the tab for 2D styling, but there's also a 3D style. So when you are going to bring something like a point cloud into 3D, you can have different styling in the 3D environment than the 2D environment. So I might have a classified rendering in my 2D view, but an RGB rendering in 3D, and it'll come in however you have that set up. So there's a separate rendering tab for both those environments. This is that same scene, but this time classified based on the Z values or elevation. And here I'm showing you a couple of new settings. There's show shadows and show eye dome lighting that were just released at 3.18. And both of these settings are different ways to kind of accentuate the edges. And they're especially effective when you have something like a point cloud data set for accenting the borders of trees and the peaks of roofs of buildings and things like that. It makes those features stand out a little bit better using those options. And there's also now a new feature to export the 3D scene, as you're seeing here. And this would be so that you could bring it into something like Blender and continue working on your 3D scene in Blender, which is a specialized 3D environment and allows you to do quite a bit more. So you can now start off something with your geographic data in QGIS and export it and finish it in Blender. There's also a QGIS to 3JS plugin. And this plugin was around, it's been around for quite a while. It was there before the native 3D environment in QGIS was built. And it's still a maintained and supported plugin that's been improved over the last year or two. And it has some really nice features because it allows you to publish a 3D graphic to the web and open it up in a browser panel. So I'm going to be showing you some vector data. I have some 3D data from the buildings in Manhattan, from the New York City public data that I'm going to be showing you. There we go. So this is the data set in QGIS against a Google satellite background. It's a very large data set, and this is one that I have used in the 3D environment if I'm on a computer that has a very powerful graphics card and lots of memory. But on my laptop here, this data set doesn't work very well in 3D, but it works quite well in the QGIS to 3JS renderer. So all I've done here is install the plugin and click this button to open it. And this is already a 3D data set. So it comes in already extruded into 3D. QGIS, or the plugin, recognizes the 3D nature of the data set. And so we're looking at these 3D buildings for Manhattan. And so we can use this viewer to basically pan and move around this building's data set, just like we would in the native QGIS viewer. And you can see the Empire State Building there. And you have all the same controls that you would normally have in the 3D view. And it performs quite well once it's loaded. This took a minute or two to load, but once it's loaded, it's very smooth. And you can use this with all the types of 3D data that QGIS supports, including point clouds. And you can go to the file menu and export to web. And this will export out a series of JavaScript and HTML files that will then allow you to look at this 3D view online. So I've done that, and it just exports out a couple of CSS files and some JavaScript files and this index HTML. And the one other thing I did was just run this Python command from the directory that holds these files, python-m http.server. It sets up a local server on my machine for this directory and allows me to then just use localhost :8000 to open up that index HTML on my local machine and see how it would look online. And you can see in the web browser, it's again, performs quite well. You can zoom out and zoom in and pan around, even with this very large data set, very smoothly. So I really like this. It also gives you this natural sky background. And you can use this. I didn't spend a lot of time styling this, but you can add base maps to this, such if you wanted to have an aerial photo or even a terrain base map underneath it, you could certainly do that as well. And the one thing I wanted to also mention, I forgot when I had Mount Rainier up here, where's that? Sorry. Is that there is, it's possible to save 3D symbols. So if you open up the symbol manager in QGIS, where you have tabs for your marker, line, and fill symbols, legend, patch shapes, there's now a 3D symbols tab, and you can manage 3D symbols from here. And so you can build those up in QGIS and for a particular building and then save them out. It doesn't give you a preview of them, but it does allow you to have those in the style manager so that you can apply them to other features and other data sets. So this is what that same Manhattan buildings data looks like if I have it in the QGIS viewer and I've set up some keyframes to fly through the data. So you could do the same sort of 3D visualization with buildings using either the plugin or the native QGIS viewer. But I do find the plugin is better at handling larger data sets for some reason. So that's it. That's my quick overview of 3D in QGIS. And if there's any questions, I could take those.
Yeah, there is one question from Carl. He asked if FFmpeg is really removed from the installer, and he would have used it for stitching the JPEGs, and he couldn't find it via the network installer. So Do you know that, Kurt?
I don't know if that's been removed, but it's easily enough to install by itself on all platforms. So FFmpeg is an even more powerful option to stitch together a series of still images, and because it also offers options like saving it out to MP4 and adjusting the frame rate and things like that. So, but I don't know if I haven't looked at the latest release of the network installer to see if it's included in the libraries or not.
Okay. So any other questions? Oh, yeah. Can you show how to use the 3D icons on a map?
I don't have anything prepared to show that, unfortunately. But I know that there are some very good tutorials online that show how to do that. So let me find some of those and post them into the chat.
Okay, maybe we can also, because some of these presentations will be shared as well. So maybe we can share the links there. Okay. Any plans for QGIS to handle tile formats, SLPK, 3D tiles?
That's a good question. And I honestly don't know the answer to that. I have not seen any chat on that on the developer list, but that doesn't mean it's not in the works. That's probably something I would, Lutra Consulting is the company that has done most of the development in the 3D area. And so they are probably the ones to ask about that to see if there's plans going forward for that.